Human waste. That's what you are, Dad. You poison my life simply by being alive. This nursing home will be your grave. Those were the words my son Ethan hurled at me as he dragged me down the icy, echoing corridors of the Pines on my 72nd birthday. I never imagined that the special outing he had promised would end with me being locked away like discarded trash. Before anything else, let me say this clearly. At that moment, my life split in two. My name is Andrew Carter, and even now, sitting in my new apartment in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by old photographs that no longer feel like memories but like evidence, I still struggle to accept that the man I devoted 45 years of sacrifice to could become the same person who imprisoned me with such calculated cruelty. But to understand how we arrived there, I must go back to Tuesday, March 17th, 2024. The day of my 72nd birthday. I woke up that morning with the fragile optimism only an old father can still carry. The foolish hope that a son's love, no matter how distant, might still exist somewhere underneath the silence. Ethan had called me 3 days earlier, his tone unusually warm, almost cheerful. He said he had planned the greatest birthday gift of my life. Only later did I understand that the excitement in his voice wasn't affection, it was relief. "Dad, I'll pick you up Tuesday at 10 in the morning," he said. "Dress nicely, we're going somewhere very special." I remember exactly how my chest tightened with hope. I thought, perhaps stupidly, that this was a turning point, that we might finally reconnect after 5 years of emotional distance, ever since he had inherited his mother's company. Beatrice, my wife, the love of my life, had passed away 7 years earlier. And after that, Ethan slowly became someone I barely recognized. That morning, I prepared myself carefully. I bathed slowly, shaved with precision, put on my best light blue shirt and the gray slacks I reserved for meaningful occasions. I brewed coffee and stood by the window of my downtown apartment, an apartment I had paid for decades ago, watching the street like a boy waiting for his father. At exactly 10 a.m., Ethan's black Audi stopped in front of the building. I went downstairs smiling. He stepped out wearing a dark suit and a red tie. He hugged me, but it was brief, stiff, mechanical. I should have recognized it as a warning. Instead, I accepted the illusion. "Happy birthday, Dad. Today is a day you'll never forget." How painfully accurate those words were. The drive lasted nearly an hour, heading toward the outskirts of the city. I tried to make conversation. I asked about Sarah, my 19-year-old granddaughter, about the company, about Natalie, his wife. His answers were clipped, short, lifeless. His eyes stayed fixed on the road. I told myself he was stressed. I noticed small things. He checked his watch repeatedly. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel. When I reached for the radio, he slapped my hand away without hesitation. "I prefer silence," he snapped. My stomach tightened, but I said nothing. As the road began to wind upward into the hills, the scenery became beautiful. Tall trees, clear sky, but a knot twisted deep inside me. Then we passed a sign. "The Pines, Geriatric Residence, 2 kilometers." My mind searched desperately for innocent explanations. Maybe he volunteered here. Maybe this was part of the surprise. When the car stopped in front of a 3-story beige building with barred windows, my confusion turned to fear. "What are we doing here, son?" I asked quietly. Ethan turned off the engine and finally looked at me. What I saw in his eyes froze my blood. There was no hesitation, no warmth, just cold resolve and relief. "Dad, this is your new home." Before I could speak, Ethan exited the car, walked around, yanked my door open with force. "Let's go. Don't make this harder." "Ethan, I don't understand," I stammered. "Is this a joke?" He didn't answer. He dragged me inside. At the reception desk, a woman in her 50s wearing a white uniform looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Carter?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes, permanent admission. Everything's already arranged. Permanent admission. The words exploded in my mind. I'm not sick. I don't belong here. The receptionist avoided my eyes. She'd seen this before. Ethan pulled me down a long corridor that smelled of disinfectant and institutional food. I yelled. I begged. He remained silent until we reached a small room with a single bed, a metal locker, and a barred window overlooking a gray courtyard. He shoved me inside. Then he spoke, and his words were carved into my memory forever. Listen carefully, Dad. This is the last conversation you'll ever have. You're useless now. You're human waste. Your existence contaminates my life. Every call, every visit, every reminder of you is a burden. This is where you belong. Here you'll rot until death finally does me the favor of taking you. I couldn't breathe. The boy whose diapers I changed, the child I taught to ride a bike, the son I worked 70-hour weeks for, the education I paid for, $150,000 at the best private prep school in the city. He looked at me like I was nothing. Before I could respond, Ethan stepped forward and began stripping me of everything. My phone. You won't need this. My wallet. Neither this. The photos of Sarah I always carried. Even the watch Beatrice gave me for our 30th anniversary. Please, I begged. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. We can talk. He laughed, a hollow, cruel sound. Talk? You stopped being useful. Goodbye, Dad. Enjoy your living tomb. He walked out and locked the door. I heard his footsteps fade. Then the car engine. Then silence. I collapsed onto the bed. My heart shattered. But then something unexpected happened. I didn't scream. I didn't break. My engineer's mind, trained for decades to analyze structures under pressure, activated with terrifying clarity. I observed everything. His exact words, the receptionist's uncomfort, the prepared paperwork, the locked door. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. And sitting there in that room that smelled of abandonment, I made a decision. If Ethan believed he had destroyed me, he was wrong. I wouldn't seek reckless revenge. I would seek truth, justice, and consequence. I dried my tears. I took a deep breath, and I began to watch. Not as a victim, but as a strategist. Because if my career had taught me anything, it was this. The strongest structures are built patiently, not in rage. And what Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that the director of this nursing home, the man who signed the admissions papers, was Jake Miller, my best friend of 43 years. And he was about to find out.
The first days at the Pines passed with brutal slowness. But I endured. I observed. I remembered who I was. The morning after my confinement, a young nurse named Rose Evans brought my breakfast. She watched me with professional pity. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Did you sleep well?" "I've slept worse," I replied calmly. She blinked. Over the next weeks, I established a routine. I woke at 6, exercised lightly, spoke politely, remembered names. I wanted everyone to see my mind was intact. One afternoon, I asked Rose carefully what my son had told them. She hesitated, then confessed. "He said you admitted yourself, that you were aggressive, that you had advanced Alzheimer's." Every word was a lie. "And what do you think?" I asked. She met my eyes. "You're the most lucid patient here." Hope stirred. Later, another nurse, Linda, with 32 years of experience, confirmed it. "You don't belong here." Then she said the name, Jacob Miller. That night, at 11:15 p.m., footsteps echoed. The door opened. A tall man with gray hair and metal-framed glasses stepped inside. Our eyes met. "Andrew," he whispered. "Hello, old friend," I said calmly. "I believe we have a lot to discuss." Jake closed the door, his face pale with shock and anger. "I reviewed your file tonight," he said. "This makes no sense. I saw you 6 months ago. You were fine." I sat up on the bed, and that's where my real story truly began, gesturing for him to take the only available chair. "Sit down, Jake. What I'm about to tell you is hard to believe, but I need you to listen to me until the end without interrupting." He dropped into the chair, taking off his glasses to rub his eyes wearily. "Talk. I've known you for 43 years. I know when something is terribly wrong." For the next 20 minutes, I told him everything. The fake special birthday outing, Ethan's cruel words, how he stripped me of my belongings, the lies he told the staff about my supposed dementia and violence. Jake listened with a tense jaw, the veins in his neck standing out with each revelation. When I finished, he was silent for almost a full minute, processing the information. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling with contained rage. "Andrew, this is kidnapping, forced institutionalization without legitimate medical cause. I can get you out of here right now. I'll call the police. I'll report your son for—" "No," I interrupted him with surprising firmness. He looked at me stunned. "Not yet, Jake." "What do you mean, not yet? They're holding you prisoner. Your son committed a serious crime." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Listen to me. If we act impulsively now, Ethan will just say it was a misunderstanding, that I consented to the admission and then got confused. He has false documents. He probably bribed some corrupt doctor to sign non-existent diagnoses. You know how the legal system works. It'll be my word against his, and he has papers to back him up." Jake leaned forward, lacing his fingers. "So what do you propose?" "I need to observe more, understand the full magnitude of what he's doing, because I suspect this isn't just spontaneous cruelty. Ethan planned this meticulously, which means there's more. He's probably trying to access my estate, forge documents, sell properties. If I get out now, he'll just adjust his strategy and be more careful. But if I stay here a few more weeks under your discreet protection, we can gather irrefutable evidence." Jake's face showed an internal conflict between the impulse to help me immediately and the cold logic of my argument. He finally nodded slowly. "You're right. It's what an engineer would do. Analyze the entire structure before intervening. But Andrew, I won't leave you in this miserable room for another day." He stood up with determination. "Tomorrow morning, I'll move you to the suite on the 3rd floor, the one we reserve for family members of patients visiting for long periods. It has a private bathroom, television, internal phone. Officially, you'll still be a patient, but in reality, you'll be my protected guest." "How much of an estate is your son targeting?" I leaned back against the cold wall. 3 commercial properties in prime locations, valued together at $800,000. Investments in bonds and stocks for about $300,000. Savings accounts at Bank of America with around $220,000 accumulated over 40 years of work. Total, $1,320,000, more or less. Jake whistled low. A powerful motive to lock up a father. "Does he have access to any of that currently?" "Not directly, but if he manages to have me declared mentally incompetent using those false documents you mentioned, he could request legal guardianship and take control of everything. That's why it's crucial he doesn't know that you and I know each other. As long as he believes I'm completely isolated, vulnerable, and without resources, he'll feel safe to act, and every action he takes will be evidence." Jake walked to the window, looking at the dark courtyard. "You mentioned you have important documents. Where are they?" I smiled for the first time with genuine cunning. "In the double lining of my wallet. Ethan took it, yes, but he was always careless with details. He probably threw it in some desk drawer without checking it thoroughly. If we manage to recover it, we'll find reduced photocopies of the property deeds, access codes to my safety deposit box at the Bank of America Main Street branch, and the direct phone number of Evan Shaw." "Evan Shaw, the corporate lawyer?" "The same. My personal lawyer for 22 years. He has copies of all my legal documents, wills, powers of attorney. Yes, Jake, you can contact Evan discreetly on my behalf. He can start a silent investigation into Ethan's activities. Evan is meticulous, a former prosecutor. He'll know exactly what to look for." Jake's face showed an internal conflict between the impulse to help me immediately and the cold logic of my argument. He finally nodded slowly. "You're right. It's what an engineer would do. Analyze the entire structure before intervening. But Andrew, I won't leave you in this miserable room for another day." He stood up with determination. "Tomorrow morning, I'll move you to the suite on the 3rd floor, the one we reserve for family members of patients visiting for long periods. It has a private bathroom, television, internal phone. Officially, you'll still be a patient, but in reality, you'll be my protected guest." "How much of an estate is your son targeting?" I leaned back against the cold wall. 3 commercial properties in prime locations, valued together at $800,000. Investments in bonds and stocks for about $300,000. Savings accounts at Bank of America with around $220,000 accumulated over 40 years of work. Total $1,320,000, more or less. Jake whistled low. A powerful motive to lock up a father. Does he have access to any of that currently? Not directly, but if he manages to have me declared mentally incompetent using those false documents you mentioned, he could request legal guardianship and take control of everything. That's why it's crucial he doesn't know that you and I know each other. As long as he believes I'm completely isolated, vulnerable, and without resources, he'll feel safe to act, and every action he takes will be evidence. Jake walked to the window, looking at the dark courtyard. "You mentioned you have important documents. Where are they?" I smiled for the first time with genuine cunning. "In the double lining of my wallet. Ethan took it, yes, but he was always careless with details. He probably threw it in some desk drawer without checking it thoroughly. If we manage to recover it, we'll find reduced photocopies of the property deeds, access codes to my safety deposit box at the Bank of America Main Street branch, and the direct phone number of Evan Shaw." "Evan Shaw, the corporate lawyer?" "The same. My personal lawyer for 22 years. He has copies of all my legal documents, wills, powers of attorney." "Yes, Jake, you can contact Evan discreetly on my behalf. He can start a silent investigation into Ethan's activities. Evan is meticulous, a former prosecutor. He'll know exactly what to look for." Jake's face showed an internal conflict between the impulse to help me immediately and the cold logic of my argument. He finally nodded slowly. "You're right. It's what an engineer would do. Analyze the entire structure before intervening. But Andrew, I won't leave you in this miserable room for another day." He stood up with determination. "Tomorrow morning, I'll move you to the suite on the 3rd floor, the one we reserve for family members of patients visiting for long periods. It has a private bathroom, television, internal phone. Officially, you'll still be a patient, but in reality, you'll be my protected guest." "How much of an estate is your son targeting?" I leaned back against the cold wall. 3 commercial properties in prime locations, valued together at $800,000. Investments in bonds and stocks for about $300,000. Savings accounts at Bank of America with around $220,000 accumulated over 40 years of work. Total $1,320,000, more or less. Jake whistled low. A powerful motive to lock up a father. Does he have access to any of that currently? Not directly, but if he manages to have me declared mentally incompetent using those false documents you mentioned, he could request legal guardianship and take control of everything. That's why it's crucial he doesn't know that you and I know each other. As long as he believes I'm completely isolated, vulnerable, and without resources, he'll feel safe to act, and every action he...
But first, we must consider what exact information you need him to investigate. I sat at the desk, opening the notebook to a clean page. My engineer's brain was shifting into structural planning mode. First, I need Evan to check all the bank accounts under my name. If Ethan tried to access them, there will be digital traces. Banks record every login attempt, every information request, every suspicious movement. Jake nodded as I wrote. Second, he must verify the legal status of my 3 properties. If Ethan is trying to sell or mortgage them, he'll need to forge my signature on deeds. That leaves notarial evidence. Third, I want to know if he filed any legal requests for guardianship or legal incapacitation based on those false medical diagnoses. And regarding your wallet, Jake asked, you mentioned documents hidden in the lining. I closed my eyes, visualizing every detail of that brown leather wallet I had used for 15 years. In the secret compartment behind the card section, there are reduced photographs of the property deeds for Main Street, Oak Avenue, and Maple Drive. Also, the 6-digit code for my safety deposit box at Bank of America, 739215, and Evan's business card with his direct number handwritten on the back. Jake was writing furiously. Do you think Ethan checked that compartment? My son inherited many things from his mother, but attention to detail was not one of them. Beatrice was organized and meticulous. Ethan was always impatient, acting on impulse. He probably emptied the wallet of visible cards and cash, assuming he had everything. The secret compartment requires pressing 2 side buttons simultaneously while sliding the lining. It's not obvious. Then it's likely those documents still exist. Where do you think he kept your belongings? I reflected, remembering Ethan's personality. Knowing his ego, he probably left them in his office at the company, the one he inherited from Beatrice in the financial district. He likes to keep trophies of his victories nearby. Besides, if he plans to forge documents, he would need to study my signature, which means keeping samples accessible. Jake got up, walking to the window. Evan could hire a private investigator to recover that wallet. Or better yet, if we get evidence that it contains your stolen documents, the police could get a search warrant. Not yet, I repeated firmly. Every premature action will alert Ethan that there's resistance. I need him to feel absolutely secure, invincible, so that he makes bigger and bigger mistakes. Confident criminals are careless criminals. Jake returned to the sofa, studying me with a mix of admiration and concern. Andrew, I understand the logic, but voluntarily staying here while your son thinks he's destroyed you, are you sure you can emotionally handle it? The question was valid. During these weeks, I had cried in the lonely night. I had felt my heart break every time I remembered the little boy who used to hug me, shouting, "Dad," when I came home from work. But something bigger than my personal pain was at stake. Jake, if I give in now to the impulse to escape and report him, Ethan will receive legal punishment. Yes, maybe a few months in jail, a fine, a criminal record, but his soul will still be rotten. His understanding of what he did will remain superficial. There will be no real transformation, only resentment for being caught. I stood up, feeling absolute conviction. But if I build this correctly, if I document every lie, every betrayal, every act of cruelty, and then present it to him not just as legal evidence, but as a moral mirror, there is a microscopic possibility that something in him will awaken, that he will look at that mirror and finally see the monster he became. And if there is even a 1% chance of saving his humanity, it's worth the additional suffering. Jake had tears in his eyes. You're a better man than I am, brother. I would just want to destroy him. Destruction is easy. Reconstruction is the true challenge of engineering, whether it's of buildings or human souls. We spent the next hour developing a detailed plan. Jake would contact Evan that same afternoon using a secure phone from his private office. He would explain the complete situation, sending him photographs of my fraudulent file as preliminary proof. Evan would begin an immediate, discreet investigation into suspicious financial movements. Furthermore, Jake would install a miniature security camera in my suite, officially for medical monitoring. In reality, it would record our strategic meetings as documentary backup. He would also provide me with internet access via a personal tablet, allowing me to research relevant laws on forced institutionalization, fraudulent guardianship, and elder rights. One more thing, I said as Jake prepared to leave. I need you to record conversations with the staff about what Ethan told them during my initial admission, his false statements about my supposed violence and dementia, testimonies from Rose, Linda, whoever interacted with him. Every documented lie is future ammunition. Consider it done. Rose has already expressed doubts to me about your diagnosis. I'm sure she will testify if necessary." After Jake left, I sat at the desk with the cell phone in my hands. I had Evan's number memorized after 22 years of professional relationship, but I decided to wait until Jake made initial contact. It was important for Evan to receive the full context before hearing my voice, to avoid emotional reactions that could compromise the investigation. Instead, I opened the notebook and began to write a detailed chronology of events. Exact date of my admission: Tuesday, the 17th of March, 2024. Approximate time, 11:30 in the morning. Ethan's exact words: "You're worthless now. You are human waste that only contaminates my life with your existence." Every detail, every gesture, every potential piece of evidence. I also wrote reflections on my history with Ethan. The beautiful moments. His first day of school when he was 5. Crying, clinging to my leg until I convinced him he would be brave. His university graduation with honors in business administration, the pride I felt. His wedding with Natalie, dancing the waltz awkwardly while I laughed. The birth of Sarah when he called me at midnight shouting excitedly, "Dad, you're a grandpa." But also the dark moments I ignored out of blind love. When I caught him at 16 stealing money from Beatrice's wallet. When he brutally fired a housekeeper for accidentally breaking an expensive plate. When he mocked a beggar on the street in front of Sarah, teaching her contempt. The signs were always there. I just refused to see them, blaming stress, outside influences, anything except accepting that my son was developing corrupt values. That night, lying in the comfortable bed with clean sheets, I looked at the ceiling, thinking about Beatrice. Had she been alive, would she have prevented this? Or would Ethan have betrayed her too to inherit faster? The second option terrified me more. My phone vibrated. A message from Jake. "Contacted Evan. He's coming tomorrow, disguised as a social consultant. Get ready." I smiled in the darkness. The chess pieces were beginning to move. Evan Shaw arrived at the nursing home at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning the next day, dressed in a discreet gray suit and carrying a black leather briefcase that identified any corporate consultant. He was 55 years old, with perfectly cut salt and pepper hair and that penetrating gaze of a lawyer who had spent 20 years in the prosecutor's office before establishing his private practice. Jake personally escorted him to my suite, introducing him to the staff as a specialist in geriatric patient rights conducting a quality audit. No one questioned the explanation. When the door closed behind them, Evan dropped all professional pretense and hugged me tightly. "Andrew, my God, when Jake told me on the phone yesterday, I was up all night. I couldn't believe Ethan was capable of something like this." His voice cracked slightly. He took a deep breath, regaining his composure. "Sit down. I have a lot to report to you, and none of it is good." The three of us settled around the desk. Evan opened his briefcase, extracting a thick folder with documents marked with colored tabs. His meticulous organization was legendary among his clients. "Let's start with the bank accounts," he said, opening the blue section. "Your son tried to access your 3 main accounts at Bank of America using powers of attorney that he fabricated himself. He forged your signature on notarized documents claiming you granted him full legal power over your finances due to progressive cognitive decline. Luckily,
Your branch manager, Vincent Ortega, has known you personally for 18 years. He found the signature suspicious and temporarily blocked access, requesting additional verification. I felt relief mixed with horror. Vincent saved me without knowing it. Does Ethan know he was blocked? Yes. According to Vincent, your son made a furious scene at the branch 10 days ago, shouting that it was a family emergency that he needed the funds for your urgent medical treatment. Vincent held firm, explaining that bank protocol requires personal confirmation from the account holder in cases of such significant changes. Ethan threatened to sue him. Jake intervened, his voice laced with contempt. "So he's been actively trying to steal for more than 2 weeks? It wasn't a momentary impulse. It's a planned campaign." Evan moved to the yellow section. Now, the properties. Your 2020 model Mercedes-Benz was sold 3 weeks ago to a used car dealership in a suburb for $15,400.
Ethan used a copy of the vehicle's documentation that he apparently had access to, signed as your proxy, and received payment in cash. The dealership didn't verify properly because the transaction looked legitimate on the surface. "My car," I murmured. "I bought that Mercedes to celebrate my 70th birthday. A gift to myself after decades of austerity. Is it recoverable?" "Difficult. It's already been resold to a third-party buyer. We could litigate, but it would take years. Better to use it as criminal evidence of misappropriation," Evan continued, his face growing grimmer. "But here's the truly alarming part. Your commercial property on Main Street is in the process of being sold. Ethan found a buyer willing to pay $400,000. He already signed a purchase agreement, again using forged documents. The final closing is scheduled for 6 weeks from now before a notary. If that goes through, you'll lose a property valued at almost $500,000. The air left my lungs. How do we stop that? By filing a formal complaint with the Notary Association. I've already drafted the document. I just need your signature authorizing me. The notary's obligated to verify the seller's personal identity before closing. When he discovers the fraud, not only will the sale be canceled, but there will be documentary evidence of the attempt. I took the pen Evan extended to me, signing with a trembling but determined hand. "What else?" Evan exchanged a significant look with Jake before opening the red section. "Andrew, your daughter-in-law, Natalie, visited this nursing home exactly 2 weeks ago. She spoke with Dr. Ramirez, the general practitioner here." Jake nodded gravely. "I reviewed the notes from that conversation yesterday. Natalie tried to convince Dr. Ramirez to increase your psychiatric medication, specifically strong antipsychotics that would induce genuine confusion and cognitive decline. She claimed you were dangerous, that you had threatened violence." "They wanted to actually turn me into what they claimed I already was," I whispered, feeling nauseous. "Dope me until the lie became reality." "Exactly. Fortunately, Dr. Ramirez is an ethical professional. He refused the request, explaining that he only prescribes medication based on direct medical evaluation, not family requests. But here's the worst part." Jake took a small recorder from his pocket. "I have the facility's common areas monitored for security. Natalie didn't know there was a microphone in the waiting room. Listen to this." He pressed play. Natalie's voice emerged, crystal clear and unmistakable. "Doctor, understand the situation. My father-in-law is obstructing our financial plans. As long as he's lucid, he can block transactions we need to complete. If you could just help him be calmer, more confused, we would make a generous donation of $5,000 to this home. No one needs to know the details." Dr. Ramirez's voice responded coldly. "Ma'am, what you are suggesting is bribery to commit medical malpractice. I must ask you to leave my office immediately." The sound of hurried footsteps, a door slamming violently. Jake turned off the recording. "Documented bribery attempt," Evan said with dark satisfaction. "This is a serious felony. Natalie could face up to 4 years in prison." I remained silent, processing the depth of the conspiracy. It wasn't just Ethan acting impulsively. It was a coordinated operation with Natalie to chemically incapacitate me illegally while systematically stealing everything I worked for over half a century. "Is there more?" I asked, though part of me feared the answer. Evan nodded heavily. "Ethan filed a preliminary judicial request to have you declared legally incompetent. He used the false medical diagnosis he obtained, God knows how, probably by bribing some unscrupulous doctor. The hearing is scheduled for 2 months from now. If the judge approves the incapacitation without you present to defend yourself, Ethan would obtain full legal guardianship, total control over your person and your estate." "Then we have 2 months to build a complete counterattack," I said, feeling my determination crystallize. "Evan, I need you to document absolutely everything. Every bank fraud attempt, every forgery, every bribe. We will build a criminal case so solid it's irrefutable." "I'm already on it. But Andrew," Evan looked at me directly, "why not get out now? We have enough evidence to arrest Ethan and Natalie today. Why wait?" I got up, walking to the window overlooking the garden. An old man was walking slowly among the rose bushes, pushed in a wheelchair by a young nurse. I thought of all the elderly parents betrayed by greedy children, reduced to objects, to monetary obstacles. "Because I want Ethan to go all the way," I replied without turning. "I want him to execute his plan completely, to believe he has won, to savor that false victory. Only then,
when he's most confident and vulnerable, will we show him the full mirror of his monstrosity. The fall from a greater height generates a greater impact, and only an absolute impact has a microscopic chance of genuine transformation. Evan closed his folder slowly. You're playing chess while your son is playing checkers. He has no idea the opponent he's facing. My son taught me something without meaning to. He taught me that paternal love has limits, that a moment comes when you must choose between protecting your child from consequences or protecting them with consequences. I have spent 72 years choosing the first option. It's time to choose the second. Jake approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. And if this doesn't change him, Andrew, if it's too late for his redemption, then at least you'll stop him from destroying others. Sarah, future partners, employees, anyone who crosses his path. Sometimes saving a soul means first breaking it completely to rebuild it from a solid foundation. The three of us fell silent, united by a common purpose. Evan finally spoke. I'll continue investigating. Every week I'll bring you updates disguised as audits. We will document everything down to the last detail. After they both left, I sat down to write a long letter to Sarah. She deserved to know the truth. Eventually, but not yet. First, I had to complete this architecture of educational justice. Brick by brick, proof by proof. My phone vibrated. A message from Jake. Rose reports that Ethan hasn't called even once to ask how you are. 4 weeks of absolute silence. 4 weeks since he abandoned me here to die, forgotten. I smiled bitterly. Perfect. Every day of abandonment was another line in the file on his cruelty. On the exact day I completed 3 months locked in the pines, a rainy Thursday in mid-June, I heard desperate knocking at the door of my suite. It was 4 in the afternoon. Jake had gone to an administrative meeting at City Hall. I was reading legal reports Evan had left me that morning when the knocking became more insistent. Grandpa, I know you're in there. Please open. My heart stopped. Sarah. It was Sarah's voice, loaded with anguish and determination. I got up so fast I momentarily felt dizzy, running to the door. I pulled it open. There was my granddaughter, soaked with the rain, dark hair stuck to her face, eyes red from crying. She was carrying a university backpack on one shoulder, and in her hand she held a cell phone showing a screen with the asylum's address. We looked at each other for an eternity second before she threw herself into my arms, sobbing against my chest. Grandpa, I found you. I finally found you. I hugged her with a strength I didn't know I still possessed, feeling 3 months of concentrated pain flowing through that contact. Sarah, my girl, how? She pulled aside slightly, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Come in, we have a lot to... Does anyone else know I came? Just the reception staff, I guess. Come in quick. I closed the door, guiding her to the sofa. She dropped her backpack, looking around the suite with a mixture of relief and confusion. This place is... I didn't expect this. Dad said you were in a specialized clinic in Switzerland for experimental Alzheimer's treatment. Your father lies extraordinarily well when it suits him.
I replied with a bitterness I couldn't hide. Sit down, Sarah. I need to tell you the whole truth before he finds out you found me. For the next half hour, I told her everything. The fake birthday outing, the cruel words, the stripping of my belongings, the forced isolation. She listened, her expression transforming from shock to horror to contained fury. When I mentioned Natalie's attempt to drug me through medical bribery, Sarah stood up abruptly. I knew something was wrong. Grandpa, 2 months ago, I started noticing strange things. Dad would come home with bags from expensive stores. Mom had new jewelry every week. They bought a new Audi, a 6, for $62,000, paid in cash. When I asked where so much money was coming from, Dad said the company was booming. She sat down again, pulling a small notebook from her backpack. But I study psychology, Grandpa. I know how to recognize behavioral patterns, so I started documenting. She opened the notebook, showing me pages filled with cramped handwriting. I recorded every big purchase, every trip, every strange expense. I took the notebook, reading with growing astonishment. Sarah had documented meticulously. April 3rd, trip to Dubai, 5 days, luxury hotel, estimated $8,000. April 16th, Mom buys a diamond necklace, $18,000, according to a phone conversation I overheard. April 29th, Dad buys a Rolex Submariner, $13,000. The list went on, page after page. At the end, Sarah had calculated the total, $123,000 in 4 months. Sarah, this is pure gold as evidence. How did you know to look for me here specifically? She smiled sadly. 3 weeks ago, I tried to call you. Your number was disconnected. I went to your apartment, empty mail piling up. I confronted Dad. He repeated the Switzerland story, but something in his eyes. He was lying. I knew it with absolute certainty. She leaned forward, intensity burning in her gaze. I started investigating on my own. I went through his office one night when he went out. I found documents, papers with your signature that looked weird, different, and I found payment receipts to this residence, 3 months prepaid for $3,600 total, and then nothing, as if they had just abandoned you here, waiting for you to simply disappear. My throat tightened with emotion. You risked a lot snooping like that. If your father had caught you... I don't give a damn what Dad thinks, she said with uncharacteristic vehemence. You're my grandfather, the only one who taught me real values, who listened to me when everyone ignored me, who paid for my university when Dad said it was an unnecessary expense because women just get married anyway. I owe you everything. Tears were rolling freely down my face now. Sarah, you have to listen to me carefully. What I'm about to ask you is difficult, maybe impossible, but it's crucial. She nodded seriously. Anything, Grandpa. I need you to go back home and act as if nothing happened. You cannot reveal that you found me. You cannot confront your father. I need you to be my eyes and ears on the outside, documenting your parents' every move while I build a solid legal case against them. I saw the conflict in her expression. You want me to pretend everything is normal while I know they have you prisoner here? I'm not a prisoner anymore, I explained. The director of this home, Jacob Miller, is my best friend at 43 years. He's protecting me, helping me gather evidence. I have a lawyer working on the case, but we need more time, more proof. If we act prematurely now, your father might escape the full consequences. Sarah processed the information, biting her lower lip as she had since she was a child when she was thinking deeply. So this is a trap. You're letting Dad think he won while you prepare a counterattack. Exactly. But Sarah, you must understand something. This will end with your father facing serious criminal charges. Prison, probably. Your mother, too. Can you live with that? She looked at me without flinching. Grandpa, a month ago, I heard Mom say on the phone, the old man should just die quickly and save us the trouble. She was talking about you. My own father calls you human waste when he thinks no one is listening. They're not my parents anymore. They are greedy strangers using your money to live out luxury fantasies while you rot here. So yes, I can live perfectly fine with watching them pay. I hugged her again. You are stronger and braver than I was at your age, but this will be painful, seeing them daily, faking family love while you know the truth. I've already been living it for weeks, she replied. At least now I'll have a purpose. What specifically do you need me to document? We spent the next hour strategizing. Sarah would continue her detailed expense journal. She would try to photograph documents if she got access to Ethan's office again. She would record conversations when possible using a recording app on her phone. She would report any strange meetings, suspicious calls, unusual behavior. Also, I added, keep in touch with my close friends, Philip Reed, Marcus Torres, people who have known me for decades. Ask them to write testimonial statements about my historical mental state, confirming I never showed signs of mental deterioration or violence. Those testimonies will destroy your father's false diagnosis. Sarah was writing furiously in a new notebook I provided. How often do we communicate? Use this number. I wrote my secret phone number on a piece of paper. Memorize it, then destroy the paper. Call me only from private places, never from your house where they might hear you. The university library, public restrooms, parks, vary the locations. She memorized the number, repeating the digits until she mastered them, then tore the paper into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet.
When she returned, her expression was that of a soldier accepting a dangerous mission. "What last thing, Grandpa? What happens to me at the end of this? When Dad and Mom are arrested, where do I end up?" I took her hands in mine. "Sarah, you are innocent. You are a victim of their lies, too. Whatever happens, I will protect you. I have resources, properties, investments that your father couldn't touch. Your education is secured. Your future is secured. You will never be alone." She cried silently, squeezing my hands. "Thank you, Grandpa, for everything, for not giving up." "We Carters don't give up," I replied with a small smile. "Your grandmother Beatrice taught me that, and now you remind me of it." Sarah stayed for another half-hour before the rain subsided. When she finally prepared to leave, she hugged me one last time. "I'll get you out of here soon, Grandpa, I promise." "You already did, my girl. You gave me back hope and purpose. That's worth more than physical freedom." I watched her walk away down the hall, backpack on her shoulder, head held high. In her, I saw the future, redemption, proof that not all was lost. If my bloodline produced a monster like Ethan, it also produced an angel like Sarah. That night, lying in the dark, I reflected on the strange balance of the universe. I lost a son, but I gained a warrior granddaughter. And maybe, just maybe, at the end of this painful road, I would get some part of that son back too, or at least save his soul from total damnation. The last week of June marked the definitive turning point in my strategy. 3 months exactly since my forced admission, and every piece of the puzzle finally fit together with the precision of a Swiss watch. Evan arrived that Monday at noon with a briefcase noticeably heavier than on previous visits, his face displaying a mix of professional satisfaction and moral disgust. "Andrew, we have everything," he announced, dropping the briefcase on my desk with a heavy thud. "Absolutely everything needed to legally bury your son and Natalie. The question is no longer if we can win, but how long you want them to suffer before we act." Jake entered moments later, locking the door. We had synchronized these meetings like a military operation. The 3 of us sat down as Evan unfolded folders organized with numbered tabs from 1 to 15.
"Let's start with the most recent bombshell," he said. Opening folder number 1, confirmed via private investigator. Ethan stopped paying the nursing home after exactly the initial 3 prepaid months. $3,600 was the total he paid out. After that, absolute silence. He expected the administration to simply transfer you to an overcrowded public facility, or even worse, leave you on the street when they couldn't contact him. Jake intervened, his voice thick with disgust. "Indeed, we received 3 administrative calls trying to contact Ethan about payment renewal. All went straight to voicemail. He intentionally avoided responding, assuming we would just get rid of the problem automatically." "Premeditated abandonment," I commented coldly. "Add it to the file." Evan nodded, making a note on his tablet. Folder 2, audio recording of Natalie attempting to bribe Dr. Ramirez with $5,000 to psychiatrically medicate you. I have an official certified transcript. Medical bribery, penalty up to 4 years in prison, he continued methodically. Folder 3. Forensic analysis of bank documents proves the signatures on the powers of attorney submitted by Ethan were forged. I hired 3 independent handwriting experts. All 3 agree. Crude imitations of your authentic signature. Here are the technical reports with digital overlays showing discrepancies in stroke pressure, angles, proportions. Sarah had sent me a photograph of one of those false documents. Seeing it now under professional analysis was unsettling. My son had practiced my signature dozens of times to create a convincing version for an untrained eye, but modern technology revealed every microscopic irregularity. Folder 4, Evan proceeded. Fraudulent sale of your Mercedes-Benz. I have a sworn statement from the dealership confirming Ethan presented himself as your legal proxy. He used documentation that appeared legitimate. He received $15,400 in cash, which he never declared on his taxes. Tax evasion added to misappropriation. Jake whistled low. How many crimes are we up to? 7 different ones so far, Evan replied without looking up from his notes. Folder 5. Attempted sale of the Main Street property. I contacted the notary designated for the closing. He confirmed an appointment scheduled for July 23rd, exactly 3 weeks from today. Ethan already signed the purchase agreement using forged documents again. The notary accepted my formal complaint, blocked the transaction, and initiated an internal investigation. Does the buyer know what's happening? I asked. Yes. A man named Vicky Science, a legitimate businessman who thought he was making an honest deal. He's furious with Ethan, threatening to sue for damages for wasting his time and resources on due diligence. He could be a valuable witness at trial. Evan opened folder 6 with a particularly grim expression. This is perhaps the most disturbing. Sarah provided me with her journal documenting the extravagant spending of your stolen funds. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the exact origin of the money. Results? Ethan sold your Mercedes for $15,400 cash. He withdrew $48,000 from a joint savings account you had with Beatrice, an account he inherited when she died, but legally was not supposed to touch until your passing, according to the will's clauses. I felt a stab in my chest. That account was for Sarah. Beatrice and I established it specifically for our granddaughter's university education. I know. I read Beatrice's will. Clause 17, paragraph 3. Funds are to remain untouched until the passing of my husband, Andrew, at which time they will be transferred in full to our granddaughter, Sarah Carter, for her higher education. Ethan violated his own mother's testamentary will. Jake stood up, walking to the window with his hands in his pockets. How can someone fall so low, not only betraying his father, but also desecrating the memory of his mother? Greed dissolves bonds that love built, I said quietly. Continue. Evan. Folder 7. Testimonial statements that Sarah collected following your instructions. Philip Reed, your bridge partner of 25 years, confirms you play complex games, memorizing every card played. Marcus Torres, your gym partner, testifies you completed the Chicago Marathon at 70. Dr. Alice Mendoza, your primary care physician of 18 years, provides a complete medical history showing 0 signs of cognitive decline in annual exams as of last February, 1 month before your admission. Medical evidence completely contradicts the fraudulent diagnoses Ethan presented. Jake summarized. Exactly. Folder 8. Financial trace of Ethan and Natalie's expenses for the last 4 months. Trips to Dubai and Paris, $12,000. Audi, a $62,000, paid in cash. Various jewelry, $23,000. Designer clothes, $8,000. Luxury restaurants, $7,000. Electronics, $4,000. Total documented by Sarah, $123,000 exactly. Evan looked at me directly. Andrew, your son spent almost as much in 4 months of frivolity as you earned in 3 years as a civil engineer. Stolen money while he had you locked up believing you were forgotten. I took a deep breath, controlling the rage that threatened to overflow. What else? Folder 9. Judicial request for legal incapacitation filed by Ethan 6 weeks ago based on medical reports I investigated personally. The supposed doctor who signed the advanced Alzheimer's diagnosis turns out to be Raul Vega Molina, a retired doctor who lost his license 3 years ago for gross negligence. He is currently barred from practicing medicine. However, he apparently sells signatures for cash. How much did Ethan pay him? Jake asked. According to bank records I obtained via a preliminary court order, $2,500 transferred to Vega Molina's account on March 8th, 9 days before your admission. Payment for a false diagnosis documented electronically. The folders continued. 10. Forensic psychological analysis requested by Evan, evaluating my current mental capacity through interviews we conducted here. Conclusion: cognitive function superior to 90% of men my age. 10. Testimony statements from the nursing home staff, Rose and Linda mainly, confirming my consistent lucid behavior for 3 months. 12. Complete asset investigation revealing my 3 commercial properties, investments, bank accounts. Verified total, $1,317,000. 13.
Current will naming Ethan as the primary heir, a document that obviously needs urgent modification. 14. Photographic timeline Sarah compiled showing Ethan's modest lifestyle until March versus the explosion of luxury since April. 15. Audio recordings Sarah secretly captured where Natalie says, quote, "When the old man finally dies, we'll sell everything and move to Florida. Imagine the life we'll have with over $1 million free and clear." 16. When Evan finished, silence filled the room like a dense fog. 17. 3 additional folders contained legal drafts, a complete criminal complaint, a restraining order request, and a new will completely excluding Ethan. 18. "Andrew," Evan said finally, "you have in your hands the ability to completely destroy your son. A criminal prosecution would result in a minimum of 5 years in prison, adding up all the crimes. He will lose his company, reputation, family, everything. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed?" I closed my eyes, visualizing the little boy Ethan once was. 5 years old, crying after falling off his bike, me bandaging his scraped knees while promising, "Dad will always protect you." But that boy died long ago, replaced by a man who called me human waste. "Proceed with everything," I replied, opening my eyes, but with one modification. They both looked at me quizzically. "I want to include a path to redemption in the will. If Ethan demonstrates genuine change through 500 hours of community service in nursing homes over 5 consecutive years, documented weekly psychological therapy, and full restitution of the stolen money, he can receive a small monthly pension of $1,200, not the full inheritance, but a dignified survival. Sarah will inherit 80% with the condition of helping him if he meets the requirements." Evan blinked, surprised. "After everything he did to you, you're still giving him an out." "It's not an out. It's a final chance to save his soul. He will probably refuse it. He will probably fail. But I need to know that I tried until the absolute end." Jake smiled sadly. "You're a better man than your son deserves." "Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just a father who can't completely give up hope." The first day of July dawned with a clear sky and a pleasant 22 degrees. A perfect day for freedom. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a court officer knocked on the door of my suite, handing me a sealed envelope with the court's insignia. Jake was present as a witness.
"Mr. Andrew Carter," the officer read formally, "you are hereby notified that an order for your immediate release has been issued following a review of your case. You are free from this institution effective immediately. Furthermore, a protective order has been issued against Ethan Carter and Natalie Carter, prohibiting them from direct or indirect contact with you under penalty of arrest." I signed the acknowledgement of receipt with a surprisingly steady hand. 3 months of planning were culminating, but this was just the beginning of Phase 2, confrontation and consequences. Evan had coordinated everything meticulously. I would not return to any of my known addresses. Instead, I moved to an apartment I bought 15 years ago in a discreet neighborhood, a property Ethan never knew existed, a 4th property kept in absolute secrecy, a refuge I had planned precisely for unpredictable emergencies like this one. The apartment was on the 5th floor of an old restored building, 60 square meters, 2 bedrooms, a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined square, modest but comfortable. Jake accompanied me personally, helping me set up basic furniture that Evan had bought days earlier. "Are you sure you don't want to stay at my house?" Jake offered as we arranged clothes in a closet. "I have a guest room that's permanently empty." "I need independence," I explained. "This place represents a new beginning. Besides, strategically, it's better that Ethan can't trace me through known associations." As we were organizing, my cell phone rang. Sarah. "Grandpa, Dad just received a large envelope by certified mail. He's pale reading the documents. I hear him mentioning criminal complaint, forgery, court order. I think your counterattack has arrived." "That's right, my girl. Stay alert, but stay safe. Don't intervene, no matter what. Observe and report." 5 minutes later, Evan called. The 4 criminal complaints were delivered simultaneously. One to Ethan at his office, another to Natalie at the gym where she does Pilates,
a third to the notary who was going to close the fraudulent sale, and a fourth to Bank of America. A preventive freeze on all your accounts against unauthorized access has also been executed. Ethan will discover he is completely cut off from your estate." I hung up and looked at Jake. Now comes the interesting part. Ethan will try to contact me desperately. I didn't have to wait long. At 11 in the morning, Rose called me from the Pines. "Mr. Carter, a man claiming to be your son arrived 10 minutes ago demanding to see you. He's yelling at the reception, threatening to sue the home. We explained that you were legally released this morning, but he doesn't accept the answer. Should we call security?" "Yes, Rose, and document everything. If he becomes violent, call the police." Half an hour later, Sarah reported, "Grandpa, Dad came home like a hurricane. He broke a lamp throwing it against the wall. He's yelling that someone betrayed him, that this is a conspiracy. Mom is crying, saying they need a lawyer urgently. Dad tried to call you at your old number, but obviously it's disconnected. Now he's calling all your known friends. No one is answering." I smiled with grim satisfaction. Philip, Marcus, and the others had been instructed to completely ignore any contact from Ethan. The noose was tightening. At 2 in the afternoon, Natalie appeared at Evan's office without an appointment. He called me from the restroom while she waited in the reception. "Andrew, your daughter-in-law is here, hysterical. She says she wants to negotiate, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. Should I see her?" "Record her if she agrees to talk, but make it clear there is no negotiation possible. The criminal charges are filed. Only the DA's office can withdraw them now, and they won't with such overwhelming evidence." Evan saw her briefly as he told me later. Natalie alternated between tearful pleas and veiled threats. "Andrew is senile, confused. We were just trying to protect him. This is elder abuse, manipulated by you." Evan simply handed her a copy of the audio recordings where she tried to bribe Dr. Ramirez and talked about waiting for the old man to die. Natalie staggered out of the office. The real blow came at 4 p.m. The prosecutor assigned to the case, a woman named Beatrice Romero, with a reputation for being relentless, summoned Ethan and Natalie for a mandatory deposition on July 9th. Evan had presented such an exhaustive file that the prosecutor decided to proceed immediately without further investigation. Sarah sent me a photograph of the summons that Ethan left on the dining room table. On it, a list of preliminary charges: illegal forced institutionalization, forgery of public documents, attempted bank fraud, misappropriation, bribery of a medical official, violation of a testamentary will, and tax evasion. 7 serious felonies that combined could result in 8 to 10 years in prison. That night, settled in my new apartment, I made chamomile tea while reviewing the documents Evan left. The new will was ready for my signature, completely drafted. Sarah would inherit $800,000 in properties and investments. $200,000 would go to a charitable foundation for nursing homes. $150,000 to Jake in gratitude for his help. The rest would cover legal fees and an emergency reserve. Ethan received exactly $0 of direct inheritance, but as I promised, there was the redemption clause. If he completed 60 monthly hours of community service in nursing homes for 5 consecutive years, attended weekly psychological therapy with verified quarterly reports, and restituted every stolen dollar through monthly payments, he could receive a survival pension of $1,200 a month, managed by a trust that Sarah would control. It was a generous offer, considering his crimes. He probably would reject it out of pride, but my conscience would be clear knowing I extended a final hand. Paula came to visit me around 8, using public transport to avoid being followed. She brought homemade food she had prepared: Spanish omelet, salad, freshly baked bread. We ate in silence initially, both processing the magnitude of what had been unleashed. "How are your parents?" I finally asked. She pushed food around on her plate. "Destroyed. Dad hasn't left his home office in hours. I hear him making frantic calls, probably looking for a lawyer willing to defend him. Mom packed a large suitcase. I think she's planning to go to her sister's in Barcelona. She's talking about divorce, about saving herself." "Rats fleeing a sinking ship," I commented without emotion. Sarah looked at me with bright eyes. "Grandpa, I know you did the right thing, but it still hurts. They're my parents.
with all their horrible flaws. Part of me still remembers when Dad used to take me to the park, when Mom brushed my hair for school parties. Does that just disappear? I took her hand across the table. It doesn't disappear, Sarah. Those memories are real, part of who they were before greed corrupted them. But people change, not always for the better. Your pain is valid. Grieving for the parents they were doesn't mean you're betraying me or justice. She nodded, tears rolling. Do you cry for Dad? Every night, I admitted. I cry for the boy he was, for the man he could have been, for the relationship we lost. But that doesn't change what I have to do. Sometimes the deepest love requires the hardest decisions. We stayed up until midnight talking about the future. Sarah was considering a specialization in gerontology after this experience, working to protect vulnerable elders from family abuse. Her passion was inspiring. When she left, I stood on the balcony watching the silent square. Lamp posts illuminated empty benches where during the day, old men fed pigeons. I thought of all the elderly parents suffering similar betrayals in silence without the resources or knowledge to defend themselves. My phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. Dad, it's Ethan. Please, we have to talk. This is a terrible misunderstanding. I love you. Call me. I blocked the number without replying. Then another message from a different number. Andrew, it's Natalie. Ethan was confused. I was trying to help you. Please drop the charges. Think of Sarah. I blocked that one too. Evan had warned me they would attempt desperate emotional manipulation. I wouldn't fall for it. A third notification, an email from a lawyer representing Ethan requesting an urgent meeting to resolve the matter out of court before a public scandal. I forwarded the email to Evan with a simple note. You answer. My answer is no. I finally went to bed past 1 a.m, sleeping for the first time in months without nightmares of abandonment, because now the one who was abandoned wasn't me. It was my son, facing the consequences he built with his own cruel hands. On September 9th, 2 months after my release, the day of the preliminary court hearing arrived. Courtroom 3 of the Chicago Criminal Court, an imposing gray stone building in City Square. Evan picked me up at 8 a.m., reviewing the final strategy together during the taxi ride. Remember, Andrew, stay calm, no matter what Ethan or his lawyers say. Judge Martinez is known for valuing composure and coherence. We've prepared this meticulously, but your personal impression will be crucial. We arrived 30 minutes early. The room was still empty. Rows of varnished wooden benches, a raised dais where the judge would preside, the national and state flags flanking the judicial seal. We took seats in the front row on the left side. Jake arrived 10 minutes later, dressed in a formal dark suit. Sarah entered alone, avoiding looking at me directly so as not to show obvious favoritism before testifying.
At 9 o'clock sharp, the back doors opened. Ethan entered with his lawyer, a burly man in his 60s named Richard Camps, known for defending lost causes with aggressive tactics. My son looked haggard, 20 years older than his 45. Wrinkled suit, deep dark circles, hands trembling slightly. Our gazes met for an endless second. I saw in his eyes a mixture of terror, rage, and something resembling a plea. I looked away. Natalie did not appear. Her lawyer, a young woman named Patricia Sands, submitted a medical certificate claiming an acute nervous breakdown that prevented her attendance. The judge frowned but accepted the temporary absence. Preliminary hearing in criminal case number 2024-3512. The People versus Ethan Carter and Natalie Carter. Charges: illegal forced institutionalization, forgery, fraud, misappropriation, bribery, and others. All rise. Judge Mercedes Martinez entered, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging from a gold chain. Her reputation was fair but inflexible. She sat, adjusting the microphone. The prosecution may proceed with the presentation of preliminary evidence. Prosecutor Romero stood up, a woman of 40 with an imposing presence. For the next hour, she presented the case systematically. She projected a complete timeline on a large screen. March 17th, forced admission. Testimonies from Rose and Linda.
Nurses testifying that Ethan described non-existent violence and dementia. Forensic analysis of forged signatures. The audio recording of Natalie trying to bribe Dr. Ramirez played in the room at high volume. When Natalie's voice filled the room saying, $5,000 to medicate him stronger, I need him to be confused, I saw Ethan sink into his chair. Several spectators in the public gallery murmured indignantly. Jake testified first. I have known Andrew Carter for 43 years. We built the Austin Municipal Building together in 1982. He is a man with a photographic memory, a brilliant analytical mind. When I discovered he was admitted to my nursing home under a false diagnosis of dementia, I was horrified. For 3 months, I observed his daily behavior. He never showed a single sign of cognitive decline. He played chess with me. We discussed international politics. He solved advanced crosswords. His admission was a complete fraud. Lawyer Camps tried to cross-examine. Isn't it convenient, Mr. Miller, that you, being a friend of the alleged victim, provided him with a privileged room and helped him fabricate this accusation against a loving family? Jake looked at him with cutting coldness. What would have been convenient, counsel, was to immediately report the fraud to the authorities. I didn't do so because Andrew convinced me to methodically document every aspect of his son's criminal conspiracy, and thanks to that strategic patience, we have irrefutable evidence. Rose and Linda testified next, corroborating everything. Rose added a devastating detail. Ethan Carter did not call a single time in 3 months to ask about his father, not once. He stopped paying after the initial period, as if he had thrown away trash, expecting someone else to pick it up. I've worked with the elderly for 12 years. I've seen negligence, but never abandonment this calculated. Evan presented the bank files showing the fraudulent access attempts. Vincent Ortega, the Bank of America manager, testified about the forged powers of attorney and Ethan's erratic behavior when they were blocked. It was Sarah's turn. My granddaughter walked to the stand with a dignity that filled me with pride. She swore to tell the truth, placing her hand on the Constitution, her voice firm. Prosecutor Romero guided her gently. Sarah, explain to the court your relationship to the defendant. Ethan Carter is my biological father. Mr. Andrew Carter is my paternal grandfather. And what did you observe in the months following your grandfather's admission? Sarah opened her journal, reading with a voice thick with controlled emotion. My parents were suddenly living like millionaires, international trips, luxury cars, expensive jewelry. When I asked where the money was coming from, Dad said the company was booming. But I checked the company's financial statements that he left in his office. The company was losing money, not making it. So I began to document systematically. She presented photographs, receipts, notes, the verified total, $123,000 in 4 months. This money didn't come from honest work. It came from stealing from my grandfather while he was locked up. Camps tried to attack. Ms. Carter, isn't it true that your grandfather promised you a substantial inheritance if you testified against your father? Sarah looked at him directly. My grandfather offered me unconditional support because he always has. I am testifying against my father, not for money, but because I witnessed his crimes, and I cannot live with that silent complicity. I'm a psychology student. I understand manipulation, abuse of power, and financial violence against the vulnerable. My father committed all of those acts. Finally, they called me to the stand. I walked slowly, aware of every gaze. I swore to tell the truth, sitting in front of Judge Martinez. Prosecutor Romero asked, Mr. Carter, describe in your own words the events of the 17th of March, 2024. I took a deep breath. For the next half hour, I recounted everything chronologically. The promise of the special outing, the drive to the Pines, the brutal revelation. Ethan's exact words, "You're worthless now. You are human waste that contaminates my life." The stripping of my belongings, the confinement, the complete isolation. At any time, did you request or consent to this admission? The prosecutor asked. Never. It was a premeditated kidnapping. My son planned every detail to get rid of me while he stole my estate. Camps tried to discredit. Mr. Carter, isn't it true that you were suffering from episodes of confusion, that you were forgetting important things? Counselor, I am 72 years old. I occasionally forget where I left my keys. That does not constitute dementia. I can recite from memory my 50 most important engineering projects, exact dates, budgets, technical specifications. Would you like me to demonstrate? Judge Martinez almost smiled. That will not be necessary, Mr. Carter. I presented the medical opinions of 3 independent doctors, all confirming my full mental capacity. Dr. Alice Mendoza, my doctor of 18 years, testified that my last cognitive exams in February showed excellent function. When Ethan was finally called to testify, his lawyer tried to have him remain silent, invoking his right not to self-incriminate. The judge allowed the silence but ordered, "The defendant may choose not to testify, but the court notes his silence and will consider it when evaluating the evidence presented." Ethan stood up briefly, looked toward where I was, and for the first time in months I saw tears rolling down his cheeks. He opened his mouth as if wanting to speak, but Camps pulled him by the arm, seating him again. Judge Martinez reviewed her notes extensively. Finally, she spoke. "The evidence presented by the prosecution is overwhelming and consistent. Multiple testimonies, forensic documentation, audio recordings, expert analysis. Everything points to a systematic criminal conspiracy to fraudulently incapacitate Mr. Andrew Carter and appropriate his estate. Given the weight of the evidence, the court orders the continuation of the criminal process. Mr. Ethan Carter will remain on conditional release with a prohibition of leaving the country, an obligation to report weekly to the authorities, and an absolute restraining order of 500 meters from his father. The trial hearing is set for November 3rd. Court is adjourned." The gavel strike echoed in the silent room. I left the courthouse surrounded by Evan and Jake. Sarah hugged me on the steps. "You did it, Grandpa." "We did it," I corrected, kissing her forehead. Ethan came out minutes later, surrounded by photographers. Someone had leaked the case to the press. Headlines on reporters' phones already read, "Elderly engineer accuses son of forced institutionalization and theft." My son searched for me with his gaze through the crowd. Our eyes met one last time before his lawyer pushed him toward a waiting car. In that gaze, I saw something I didn't expect. Not rage, but the absolute devastation of a man confronting for the first time the monster he had become. 3 days after the preliminary hearing, I sat across from the public notary Fernando Alcazar in his office on Genoa Street, a traditional office with mahogany shelves full of legal codes, an antique desk polished to a shine, the official state seal hanging on the wall. Evan accompanied me as a witness, along with Jake, who had insisted on witnessing this historic moment. "Mr. Carter," the notary began, adjusting his glasses, "I have thoroughly reviewed the will you wish to formalize. I must confirm that you are completely certain of these provisions. They are unusual, to say the least." "Completely certain," I replied, with a firmness that surprised even me. "This will represents not only the distribution of my estate, but a final attempt at a moral lesson." The notary nodded, beginning the formal reading. "Public Will and Testament of Andrew Carter.
In full possession of my mental faculties, as demonstrated by the attached medical reports, I dispose of my estate valued at approximately $1,317,000 as follows. First, I expressly revoke any previous will, codicil, or testamentary disposition. This document completely nullifies the prior will from the 15th of January 2018, which named my son, Ethan Carter, as the principal heir. I felt the weight of those words. I had drafted that previous will, thinking of family continuity, assuming Ethan would protect the legacy I built. How naive I was, the notary continued. Second, I name my granddaughter Sarah Carter as my principal heir, granting her 80% of my total estate, equivalent to approximately $1,053,000. This bequest includes the property on Main Street, the property on Oak Avenue, investments at Bank of America, and designated savings accounts. Sarah, who had come straight from the university, was sobbing silently. I squeezed her hand. Third, I donate $200,000 to the Vulnerable Elder Protection Foundation, an organization dedicated to preventing abuse against seniors. This donation is to be used specifically to create a free legal aid program for elders facing family mistreatment. It was a cause that had acquired deep meaning after my experience. If my story saved even one elderly person from suffering a similar betrayal, it was worth every moment of pain. Fourth, I donate $150,000 to Jacob Miller in recognition of his unwavering friendship of 43 years and his invaluable help during my moment of greatest vulnerability. Jake protested immediately. "Andrew, it's not necessary. I did what any brother would do." "That's precisely why you deserve recognition," I replied. "Besides, these funds can improve the facilities at the Pines, benefiting future residents." The notary waited for us to settle before continuing. Fifth, and this is the most complex clause regarding my son, Ethan Carter, I establish absolute disinheritance from the principal estate due to actions that constitute legal grounds for disinheritance according to Section 853 of the Civil Code, specifically severe psychological mistreatment, misappropriation of assets, and deliberate abandonment. The room fell completely silent. Even having discussed this extensively, hearing it formalized was stunning. However, the notary proceeded, reading carefully. I establish an extraordinary possibility of redemption through the strict fulfillment of the following conditions over an uninterrupted period of 5 years. 1. Complete 60 verified monthly hours of community service in nursing homes, personally attending to residents with dementia, paralysis, or conditions requiring intensive care. That specification was deliberate. Ethan had to experience firsthand what it means to care for the vulnerable elderly he himself planned to abandon. 2. Attend weekly psychological therapy with a certified professional, submitting verifiable quarterly reports of genuine progress. 3. Fully restitute every dollar misappropriated, including the $15,400 from the sold Mercedes, the $48,000 from Beatrix's account, and the expenses documented by Sarah, totaling $123,000. Total to be restituted, $186,800 through minimum monthly payments of $3,000. Evan had calculated that those payments would take more than 5 years to complete, ensuring a sustained commitment. 4. Submit a monthly letter of authentic reflection on his actions, no less than 2 pages, demonstrating a progressive understanding of the harm caused and genuine moral growth. These letters will be evaluated by a committee of 3 independent psychologists appointed by the executive. If Ethan Carter fulfills absolutely all of these conditions for 5 consecutive years without fail, Sarah Carter will be authorized, not obligated, to provide him with a monthly pension of $1,200 through a trust administered by her. This pension is sufficient for a dignified but modest survival, teaching the value of money earned through effort and humility. Sarah spoke for the first time. "Grandpa, what if Dad rejects these conditions? Then he will receive exactly what he gave me at the Pines. Nothing. $0. But he will have had the choice. He will have known the path to redemption. And if he chooses not to take it, it will be a conscious decision that reflects his true character." The notary concluded the reading. 6th, I name Evan Shaw as the primary executive of this will, granting him an additional $50,000 for this labor, which I anticipate will be complex and prolonged. 7th, the apartment in this neighborhood is left to Sarah as her personal residence, non-transferable for 10 years. 8th,
All expenses of this will shall be covered by a $30,000 reserve designated specifically. Do you wish to add any final personal statement? The notary asked. I had prepared this mentally for weeks. Yes, let the record state. This will is not born from hatred, but from a paternal love that recognizes its limits. I spent 72 years protecting my son from consequences, believing that love meant a shield against reality. I learned painfully that true love sometimes requires allowing consequences to teach lessons that words never could. If Ethan completes the conditions for redemption, he will demonstrate a genuine transformation worthy of a second chance. If not, he will live knowing he had that chance and refused it. In either case, I will have done my final duty as a father, offering a path to salvation without guaranteeing he would take it. I signed every page with a firm signature. Evan and Jake signed as witnesses. The notary applied the official seals. He registered the document in the notarial protocol. A certified copy was deposited in the General Registry of Last Wills and Testaments. It is legally formalized, the notary announced. From this moment, upon the testator's passing, these provisions are binding and irrevocable. We left the notary's office into the sunny September afternoon. Sarah walked between Jake and me, her arm linked with mine. "Grandpa, what do you think Dad will do when he finds out?" "I don't know, my girl, but it's no longer my responsibility to predict or control his reactions. I planted the seed. I provided the water and light through these conditions. Whether it sprouts or dies depends entirely on him." Evan took us to lunch at a quiet restaurant. During the meal, we discussed practical realities. Natalie had finalized the divorce 3 days after the preliminary hearing, taking half of the remaining marital assets and leaving Ethan with significant legal debts. The family business Ethan inherited from Beatrice was technically bankrupt. Creditors were initiating foreclosure proceedings. Ethan had lost everything: family, reputation, financial stability, social respect. Sarah reported he was living alone in a modest rented apartment in a working-class suburb, working as an administrative assistant at a hospital, earning $1,800 a month, a fall from an ostentatious executive to a basic employee in 5 months, precisely what he needed to experience. "The criminal process will conclude in November," Evan explained. "The prosecutor is seeking a 5-year prison sentence, but given that you are an elderly victim, an aggravating circumstance could increase the penalty. More likely is 3 effective years with 2 conditional if he accepts guilt and avoids a prolonged trial." "And can the community service from the will be fulfilled simultaneously with a criminal sentence?" Jake asked. "Yes. In fact, a judge might consider that voluntary community service as a mitigating factor, demonstrating genuine remorse. It would be strategically smart for Ethan to start immediately before sentencing." We finished lunch late. Sarah returned to the university for an afternoon class. Jake went back to the Pines for an administrative meeting. Evan and I walked slowly through the park, enjoying the perfect autumnal afternoon. "Andrew, you've built a brilliant legal architecture," Evan commented. "But the emotional architecture? How are you handling it?" I sat on a bench facing the pond. Some days I wake up momentarily forgetting what happened, reaching for the phone to call Ethan and chat like we used to. Then I remember, and it hurts like a fresh wound. Other days I feel relief for having finally acted after years of educational negligence. It's contradictory, complex, painful, but necessary. Do you think he'll meet the conditions? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me hopes so desperately. Another part is preparing for one final disappointment. But that uncertainty is precisely the point. He must choose. I can't force a transformation. I can only create the conditions that make it possible. We sat until the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Life went on, indifferent to human dramas, and I, for the first time in decades, felt at peace with the decisions I had made, regardless of the final outcome.
Sarah was studying for her final exams in her last year of psychology, but promised to visit that afternoon. My life had found a quiet, modest rhythm, deeply satisfying in ways that years of abundance never achieved. The final trial had concluded in November, as Evan predicted. Ethan accepted a negotiated plea, avoiding a lengthy process. The sentence, 3.5 years in prison with 2 suspended, meaning he would serve 18 effective months if he maintained good behavior, plus 500 hours of mandatory community service in geriatric institutions. Natalie received 2 years probation for complicity in bribery, avoiding prison time, but leaving her with a permanent criminal record. The family business closed for good in December. Creditors liquidated the assets, covering barely 60% of the debts. Ethan emerged from that financial shipwreck with nothing but the clothes on his back and the psychological burden of having destroyed his mother's legacy. But something unexpected happened in January that I was still processing emotionally. Sarah called me one afternoon, her voice thick with contained emotion. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something about Dad, but I don't know how you'll react." My heart sped up. "Tell me, Sarah, whatever it is." I started volunteering at the Our Lady of Polar Hospice as part of my university practicum. It's a place where patients with advanced Alzheimer's and severe dementia receive palliative care. I work there Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoons. And Grandpa, I found Dad there. I stopped breathing for a moment. "What?" "He's volunteering, Grandpa, not the mandatory service from his court sentence. He does that at another supervised location. This is extra genuine volunteering that no one is forcing him to do." I saw him helping an elderly man in his 80s to eat slowly, wiping his mouth with infinite patience, talking to him sweetly, even though the man didn't respond coherently. He didn't see me at first. I watched for 20 minutes before I approached him. "And what did you say?" I asked him what he was doing there. "Grandpa," he cried, "he said he needed to understand that every night since the hearing, he dreams of you locked up in the pines, alone, scared, abandoned, that those images haunt him without rest. He said the only way to find anything resembling peace was to experience firsthand what it means to care for the vulnerable elderly he planned to discard." Tears were rolling down my cheeks without permission. How long has he been doing this? The coordinator at the hospice told me he started in November, right after the sentencing. He goes 5 days a week, 70 to 80 hours a month, much more than the 60 required by your will. He does it without publicity, without seeking credit. He just shows up, works quietly, and leaves. That information haunted me for weeks. Part of me wanted to believe it as a genuine sign of transformation. Another part remained skeptical, remembering past manipulations. Was it real repentance or a calculated performance to eventually claim the conditional inheritance? Evan advised caution. "Andrew, 11 months don't erase 45 years of behavioral patterns. Observe, document, but don't get your hopes up prematurely. Real transformation takes years to verify." Jake was more optimistic. "I have seen genuine redemption in people. It's not common, but it happens. Maybe hitting bottom so brutally finally woke something up in him." Sarah provided me with monthly reports. Ethan continued his volunteering without fail. He had started weekly psychological therapy with a doctor specializing in the rehabilitation of family abuse perpetrators. He lived in a tiny 30-square-meter apartment. He worked his administrative job without complaint, cooked simple meals, read books on gerontology at night. He also learned about the will through his lawyer, whom Evan formally contacted. His reaction, according to Sarah, who saw him afterward, was a complete emotional collapse. "I don't even deserve that chance," he said between sobs, "but I will take it. I will dedicate the rest of my life to trying to become the man Dad always believed I could be."
In February, Sarah brought me a manila envelope. "Grandpa, Dad asked me to give this to you. He doesn't know if you'll read it, but he needed to write it." Inside was an 8-page handwritten letter. Trembling handwriting, dried tear stains visible on the paper. I began to read in the privacy of my room that night. "Dad, I have no right to call you that after what I did, but you are the only thing you ever were, my father. I, on the other hand, stopped being your son the day I called you human waste. Those words, which I thought would give me power, have become chains I carry day and night. Every elderly man I help feed at the hospice has your face. Every trembling hand I hold is yours, which I refused. Every confused look from a dementia patient reminds me of the monstrous lie I invented about you. I don't sleep for more than 3 hours at a time. Nightmares are my only deserved company. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because Dr. Alvarez, my therapist, says I must face the complete truth. I destroyed the noblest man I ever knew for a greed so stupid that now I don't understand how I could value money over your love. Mom would be devastated. Sarah looks at me with pity more than love. I lost everything, and that should be punishment enough. But it's not, because worse than losing material things is waking up every day knowing I betrayed the only being who loved me unconditionally. I have started to pay back the money, $3,000 a month from my $1,800 salary. I live on $700. I eat rice, lentils, bread. I walk 4 kilometers to work every day to save on transport. I'm selling my remaining possessions, not because of the will's obligation, but because I don't deserve comfort while you suffered because of me. Jake visited the hospice where I volunteered. He saw me from afar without me knowing. Sarah told me later. She said he would report to you. I don't know if that matters. I do this because every time I hold the hand of an abandoned old man, I imagine it's yours, which I let go of so cruelly. And in those moments, for brief seconds, I feel something close to a purpose. Dad, if you read this, I just want you to know you are right not to believe me yet. I don't believe me either, but I will keep trying every day, for years if necessary, to become someone who maybe, someday, far away, deserves to look you in the eye again without dying of shame. Your son, who stopped being one, but begs to be able to earn that title back. Ethan. I folded the letter slowly, placing it in my desk drawer next to old photographs of Ethan as a child. I didn't know what to feel. Pain, hope, skepticism, wounded love, all mixed in a tangle impossible to unravel. When Jake arrived for lunch, I showed him the letter. He read it completely, leaving it on the table with a deep sigh. Andrew, this could be sophisticated manipulation, or it could be a genuine awakening. Only time will tell. I know, but Jake, for the first time in months, I feel something I thought was dead. A microscopic hope that my son is not completely lost. Paula arrived that afternoon with additional news. She had spoken extensively with Dr. Alvarez, Ethan's therapist, who, with her patient's permission, shared her professional perspective. Your father is experiencing what we call a post-traumatic existential crisis. The weight of his actions crushed him psychologically. He is in a genuine, painful process of deconstructing his ego and reconstructing his values. I don't guarantee success, but the effort is authentic. The following months continued in a similar pattern. Ethan maintained his job, volunteering, therapy, and restitution payments. No failures, no excuses, no publicity. Paula kept me informed, but respected my need for emotional distance. In April, almost a full year after the nightmare began, I received a second letter from Ethan, shorter, more focused. It detailed lessons learned while caring for Don Ricardo, an 87-year-old patient with terminal Alzheimer's who believed Ethan was his deceased son. I hug him, Dad. I let him call me Michael. I give him the comfort I denied you, and every hug is my penance and my education. That night, for the first time, I considered the possibility of an eventual reconciliation. Not now, maybe not for years, but someday, if Ethan continued on this path, perhaps we could share a coffee in silence. It wouldn't erase the past. I would never forget. But maybe, just maybe, we would find something new, built on the ruins of what was destroyed. I stood up from the balcony as Jake knocked on the door. Life went on, day after day. Paula was thriving, graduating with honors and accepting a job at the Elder Protection Foundation. Jake and I were planning a trip to Austin to revisit the building we built 40 decades ago.